Hi, welcome. Today we'll be talking about the basic CSS selector. But before we move forward, I want to talk about what CSS is for the benefit of those who doesn't know what CSS is. CSS is called the cascading style sheet. It's what you use in adding the beauty that you get to see on any website. Things like the color, the font size, the over effect, the animation you get to see on the website. All those things are done using CSS. And now, let me show you how you write CSS by understanding the basic syntax of CSS. Alright, for you to be able to write CSS or apply any style to your HTML document, first of all, you have to select a particular HTML document you want to apply style with. And we call that a selector. A selector is what you use to specify which HTML element you want to add style to. So let's say, for example, P. P is meant for a paragraph. Then the next thing is the declaration block. The declaration block is what contains the properties that you want to apply to the HTML element you just select, which is paragraph, right? So I want to give the paragraph a color called red. Color red. As you can see, this is the property name, while this is the property value, meaning I'm saying I want to apply red color to all the p tag in this HTML document. And as you can see, all the p tag is selected and they have red as the color. So this is the basic syntax of how you write your CSS. This thing here is called the selector, and while this is called the declaration block. Then inside the declaration block, we have the property name and the property value. So the property is called color and the value is called red, and we are applying red color to our p tag. So now let's move to the basics selectors for CSS. The first one I'll be talking about is called the universal selector. What is the universal selector? Universal selector is a selector you use in targeting all your HTML documents and apply a specific style to it. So, and I'll also be using some case scenario to explain this universal selector. So the universal selector is asterisk. That is what we call the universal selector. We are saying select all the HTML elements in this document and apply a specific style to them. So what style do I want to apply to this HTML document? For example, I want to apply background color, and I'll call it dodgy blue. I love dodgy blue. As you can see, I have my terminator, which is called the semicolon, and I have the column which separates the property name and the property value, and we have the declaration block, and we also have our selector, which is the universal selector. Always write your CSS in this format, which is the syntax, mean you're obeying the syntax. Now, the case scenario where I usually use universal selector is when I want to do things like CSS reset. What is CSS reset? CSS reset is where you want to remove all the default styles that comes with the HTML document. Okay, this default style is being applied by your browser. So, for example, if you don't want it, you can use this universal selector to select all the HTML document and remove whatever style that is on the HTML document. So, there are two basic styles that usually your browser agent apply to your document. Things like your padding and margin. So I will remove the padding by applying padding and give it a value of 0, meaning remove all the padding that you get to see on this HTML document. The next thing is called the margin, and I will use 0, meaning I said remove all the margin. Margin is the space between each HTML element. So I'm removing all the space. As you can see, we don't have any space on this HTML document. This is one case scenario where I usually use universal selector. Now, let's go to the second case scenario. So I will comment this out because I want the documents to be long so that I can use it to explain the second case scenario. The second case scenario is the scrolling effect. Now, for us to have a scrolling effect, let's say I want to click on contact so that I'll move directly to this contact section in this page. We'll call it in-page link. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but this is the name I get to know it with. Alright, now how does this work? This works by using the ID name to specify the section. So what you need to do, your href, which is your hyperlink, you specify the section you want to use by using the pound sign. The pound sign stands for ID, right? So you say pound sign and whatever name you want the ID to be. So we have project and contact, but I want to use contact to explain this. Okay, now you now go to the section where you want to move to when you click on that link. When you click on contacts, we want to move to contact, right? Then I'll put it here. Contact start here. So I'll give it ID call contact. This is how it works. So when I come to my HTML document and click on this contact, it will move directly to this contact. As you can see, it has moved. But you're not seeing the scrolling effect, right? For example, if I'm scrolling now, you're seeing that it's moving down. But when I use this link, it just moves directly to that place and show me. But most times you want to see that scrolling effect. So how do you get to do that? You do it by applying a CSS style called scroll behavior. So by using this and our globe universal CSS selector, we are saying select all the document and anywhere you see an in-page link, apply this scroll behavior to it. So we'll go scroll behavior and the value we call it smooth. We want it to scroll down to that section and we save it. Now let's come back to our document and move up to the link. Now when we click this link, you notice that it will scroll down. Let's click it and see. You see the scrolling effect, right? Let me go back and do it again. You see? But let's remove it and do it again so you get to see what I'm trying to say. Now we've removed the scroll behavior effect, and when we come here and click, it just moves directly to that point. But if we put it back and do it again, you see that it's moving directly down to the page. So we have it here, then we click. You see that scrolling nature. So this is the second case scenario. I use the universal selector a lot. Alright, let's move to element selector. Element selector is where we use the element's name to target the elements and apply whatever style we want to apply to it. For example, I want to target the H2 element because I already have H2 element in this document and apply a color to it. So let's call color and we'll give it red. You see that all the H2 elements will have red color. As you can see now, it's actually applying the red color to the H2 element. Now, for example, if you want to apply not just only the H2, you also want to apply the paragraph. You want to give the paragraph a color red. Since you have similar style with this H2, you can actually do grouping. That's what we call grouping, meaning by using comma to separate each HTML element. So you say comma P, meaning I say select H2 and the paragraph, which is P, and apply all the styles to it. As you can see, the H2 and the paragraph is having red color. This guy is called our H4. So if you come here, we have the H4, and here this is the span tag. So that's why it's not affected. Okay, this is how you get to use your element selector, and you can use this to specify any elements on your HTML document, not just text like element. You can also do this with div. So let me show you an example by using div. For example, we have div, right? We do like this and this, and we say let's apply border to all the div elements. Now, don't forget, element selector is global to the type. What do I mean by saying global to the type? What I mean is that when you say div and apply whatever style here, it will select all the divs and apply whatever declaration I have here. So let's do border, and I'll give it 2 pixels solid, and let's do purple. This is the shorthand for applying border. So the first value here is the border width, while the second one is the border style, which is the solid line you're seeing, while this one is the border color. And as you can see, all the div elements is having what? A border around them. So that's how you get to use this element selector to target a specific element, or meaning when I say specific element, I mean all those type of element, all the type of element that you specify here will be affected. That's the reason why I said it's a global type selector. Okay, now let's move down to the class selector. Class selector, how do you define a class selector? We define class selector by using the dot operator. So you say dot and the class name. So for example, it's always advisable to use a descriptive class name so that you can be able to understand the code when you're reading it after some time. Alright, so let's say for example we want to say we want to apply a style to our heading, right? We can just say heading 2. We have heading 2 on our HTML document and want to give it a font size. of, let's say, 2 rem, right? You see that our 82 will have um 2 rem. But now, because we've applied the style here, but we've declared the style and applied CSS properties to it, but we've not applied this class to any of the HTML documents. So now let's go to our heading 2 elements and apply a class to it called heading dash 2. And you get to see that the HTML element that have the class heading type and dash 2 will increase in font size. So let's exaggerate this font size so that we'll get to understand that it's actually specifying only that HTML element that has the class heading dash 2. So let's make it 5 rems. And you can see it's very large by using 5 rems. So that's how you get to use your class selector to specify a specific HTML element and apply it to. And by the name class selector mean you can apply this class to more than one HTML element, meaning you're grouping those HTML elements and applying similar style to them. So for this, I can do this to this my heading 4 here. Also, you get to see that it's also having the same font size too. So let's go down to the heading 4 and apply the class to it. So we say class, we say heading dash 2. You now see that the font size will also be large, meaning I'm saying select all the HTML elements that have class heading dash 2 and apply the font size of 5 rems to them. So this is how it works. And also, just like you know that we do grouping, you can also do grouping here in your class. And also, there's another thing to help you to be like to make your CSS selector be more specific, meaning you can append whatever HTML elements here. For example, if you see we have heading 2 and heading 4, but if we want this style to affect only heading 2, we can come here and apply. We can say heading 2, which is the element dot heading dash 2, meaning I say select all heading 2 elements that have class heading dash 2 and apply the font size 5 rem to it. As you can see, the heading 4 is not affected, even though it's having a class heading dash 2, because the element that we specify here makes this style to be more specific to heading 2, and that's how you write more specific style to your HTML document. Okay, you can also apply more than one class on an HTML element, meaning I can say heading 2 and I can also say text, right? Meaning I'm saying heading 2 and text. And you can also target this HTML element by specifying heading 2 and text together. So how do I do that? You come down here and say dot heading 2 dash 2. We can say dot text because you have a class called heading 2 dot you have a class called text, and we'll now apply whatever declaration we want to give it to this guy. And let's do something. Let's move the text to the center of this HTML element. So we'll now say align text align center, and it will move the text to the center of this HTML document, as you can see. All right, so that's how you can use two classes to specify, to target an HTML element and apply style to them. Now, the last CSS selector we'll be talking about in this video is called the ID selector. How does the ID selector works? The ID selector, you write it by specifying a pound sign, which is this pound sign, or you can call it the hash symbol. Then you now write the name of the ID you want to target. The name of the ID is, just like I told you, always use a descriptive ID. So let's say, for example, we want to target only services. So we'll call ID services. And ID are unique to your HTML document, meaning when you name any HTML element, giving it ID service, you should not give any other HTML element that same name. You should give the HTML element a different name. That's the reason why I'm saying ID are unique kind of selectors. But if you also give it to that, it will work, but it's not advisable based on the implementation that was written in the document, in the documentation, in the CSS manifest to say, oh, this is how ID is supposed to work. All right, so we are saying target any HTML element that have ID call services. So let's go down and declare services to our HTML element and apply style to it. As you can see, this is our services section, and we want to give this div a background color. So we say ID is equal to service, right? So because we have service here, right? Now we can say we want to give it a background color of Doja blue. Say Doja blue, and you see that it's only the HTML element with the ID call services that will have the Doja blue as the background color. So this is how you get to use your ID selector. So we've come to the end of this video, and let me just summarize from the start. We start by using the universal selector. We say universal selector is what you use in selecting all your HTML elements and applying style to it. And we also give two case scenario, which is one is the CSS reset, whereby we remove all the padding and margin, while the second one is called the scroll animation, which helps you to have like the scrolling effect when you have an in-page link. The next HTML selector we talked about, which is the element selector, by using the element name to target the element and applying your CSS style to it. And we also talk about using more than one element on targeting more than one element and applying the same style to it. Oh, then the next one we talk about is the class selector, and the last one, which is the ID selector, which we said is a unique kind of selector. When you declare your ID in your CSS and you come into your HTML document and define an HTML element to have an ID, that should be for only that HTML element. Any other ID you want to define, you have to give it another name, not the name you've already given to the first HTML element. Thank you for staying tuned. Don't forget to click the like and subscribe button. That's the way you get to help me and help others to see the video easily. See you in the next video.